All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to wait a couple moments. That way we can make sure everybody can join. And while we are waiting to kick off, we're going to have a closer look at who we have in the audience today and do some quick activities as well. So real quickly, you can see that we have 22 countries represented, and we are across industries and expertise today. We have community managers, heads of success, founders, partnership managers, marketing managers, and so much more. And we're so excited that you're joining us here today for our webinar. So we'll just give folks a couple moments to join. And while we're waiting, we would like to know what your biggest challenge is with community. So we're going to pop up a poll on the screen. So please answer that question and let us know. So we'll go ahead and let you all answer this question as we're waiting for folks to join us. Christina, this is such a good question too. What is your biggest community challenge?
There's always a challenge. It's never going to be perfect. And that challenge shifts as your priorities shift, as you tend to grow and introduce new programs. So it's very timely question, because the answer you would have put last year is maybe not the same.
And I would say sometimes day to day too, right? So with community management, so much of it, I like to think of it as like a puzzle, like problem solving puzzle mania in a lot of ways, where every new challenge, you're solving something new. So it'll be interesting to see what folks identify as their biggest community challenge.
100%.
Absolutely. So far we're seeing a lot of engagement, a lot of demonstrating impact. So this is the webinar for you, definitely. We're so happy you're joining us. We'll wait a couple more moments. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll close out the poll. And Christina, do you want to jump into introductions after we share the results? I'm not sure if the results show on your screen. So if you're not seeing the results of those who are participated in the poll, engagement is number one. And Christina, does that seem like a surprise?
No, not at all.
Yeah, not at all.
Not at all.
In my mind, that's the concept puzzle piece you're trying to place, right? And then number two, also not a surprise, demonstrating impact. So this is definitely the webinar for all of you to be in, and we're so excited to have you here. So without further ado, we'll jump into introductions. Hello, my name is Morgan. I'm head of community here at Hivebrite, and I have the pleasure of being here, being joined by Christina here on Zoom. And Christina is from HubSpot. So Christina, would you like to say a few words about yourself and your community building experience so we can get to know you before we jump into all things community?
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager of Offline Community and Advocacy at HubSpot. I get to have this really interesting position where I am in the community-led growth team. I get to work with our customer marketing side, but also get to work with the community team. We have an incredibly brilliant community team, and we're all working together collaboratively to really create this special, cohesive community for our customers, for our partners, for our learners of HubSpot Academy. And so it's really lovely to be able to share some of my knowledge and my experience. I run the HubFans program, which is our advocacy program. It actually sits within the HubSpot community. So I like to say that I have this little cottage in the backyard of the HubSpot community. But it's a really great opportunity for our biggest customers and partners, people who love us and are deeply knowledgeable about HubSpot, that they're able to get opportunities to be the hero. And so a lot of my work is trying to determine, how can I make them feel special? How can I make them feel appreciated for everything that they do for us? And so I created the Inbound Correspondence Program last year, as well as the After Hour Show with George B. Thomas, and both of those came back again this year. So always looking for new opportunities to be able to really amplify and highlight the people who make our community so special. And that's me in a nutshell.
Well, what a wonderful nutshell. And I cannot wait for everyone to hear your brilliance with community building throughout
Thank
this
you.
discussion. So, folks, before we jump into discussion, I know we are so excited. I just want to make sure, and I think we already put it in the chat, but please be aware you can ask questions all throughout the webinar. So you can use the Q&A box, and we'll be sure to do our best to answer them either live or towards the end. We're going to go as the questions come. Okay, so Christina, jumping into discussion, I think, obviously this is a big question, but I think we'll probably be answering it all throughout, but we'll start with the big question that's all on our minds. What do we mean when we talk about community strategy? And could you break down the key elements of what a successful community strategy looks like? So definitely a big one, but I think it's the central piece of our discussion today.
I completely agree. I think community strategy is very much aligned to how you would set up go-to-market strategy. I think that's probably something that a lot of other people in the marketing team and in the business team would be able to understand kind of where we're going from. We talk about, and by we, I mean people in the corporate world, we talk about market fit, but we don't talk about community fit. And I think that it works very similarly. You are, when you're trying to get that product market fit, you're specifically making sure that, like, does this have a need? Does this have a demand in the space? If so, who are those people? What's their use case for it? What is the habit loops that we would need to create for them to be multiple and long-time consumers of ours? It's very similar for community market fit. So if you're coming from a space where you're not used to community, or you're coming from more of like a business side, if you look at it from that go-to-market product market fit perspective, the frameworks really work quite well to be able to seamlessly shift from one to the other. You have to determine, is this community even necessary? Does it already exist somewhere else? If so, do we want to align with that other community and strategically partner with them? Or do we want to do something completely different and start our own? If we start our own, how are we differentiating ourselves? How is it different? How are we creating a different and most times more value than those other communities are? So when you're setting up that strategy, I would really honestly lean into the product market fit framework and what does that look like? And how are you providing value? How are you communicating that value? How are you explaining the use case for them and how they need to come to you? I think that's probably the easiest jumping off point for people, because that's more mainstream knowledge versus community building knowledge. That strategy is important because so many people believe that it's a field of dreams kind of scenario with the community where if you build it, they'll come. That is not how it works.
Not at all.
Not at all.
It's so difficult to just only build it and then not be able to identify that strategy, like you said. I love how you put it into the market fit, because I think from community folks I've been connecting with, we often talk about how is there this misunderstanding of that, like you said, community fit. And I love that analogy and that alignment with that framework so much, because typically what we hear from teams who necessarily don't have the experience in community is, oh, well, if we just build this, then our members will come. But no, that's not it.
And I find that tends to be the easiest way to communicate with other teams. So if you're talking to leadership and you don't know like how to unravel that value case, for me, it's use frameworks that they already understand. That helps bridge that gap. Another great thing, and I know a lot of community builders use this, it's one of my go-tos, the community canvas. It's based off of Steve Blank's business model canvas, which if you're a founder, you probably know what the business model canvas is. You've built a business plan. And so what it does is it strips everything away to you have essentially one sheet that answers all those core foundational questions. Who is this for? What does it look like? What is the value? How do we communicate with them? What does that look like? And so if you are a community builder and you're trying to get leadership to understand, or you're new to community building and you don't know what that looks like, use the frameworks that you already understand. It's quite easy because that's what you're still doing that. You're still creating something for a target demographic. You're having to provide value, and you're having to provide specific types of value for different use cases. So they not only come once, but they come multiple times. So Community Canvas, you can get it at community-canvas.org,
Yes.
completely free. That's my go-to.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
and then think about product market fit, but how do you shift that and tweak that so it's more community fit? And I think that you'll start having just an easier conversation with leadership because they know what those things look like.
Right.
And now you're using the tools they understand to communicate how you need to set up that strategy. And that's going to help you answer those core questions
Right.
to really build the strategy off of that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect segue to our next question, Christina, which is how can community builders ensure that they align their goals with their organization and with their business goals? So making sure that they align their organization's strategic goals and their business goals within their community. And then from my experience so far, working with so many of our clients at Hivebrite, this can be such a hurdle to clear sometimes. Like we're just talking about, how do you contextualize it, but then how do you dig deeper than that? So you've set up the model for them and you're showing them what it is that this is the strategy, but how do you then strategically place these?
So what I like to do is I like to have a twofold approach where you're actually thinking about the business side and you're thinking about the community member side by side, and you're building in parallel. So from the business point of view, you're going to start from like, seriously, what do we want to do? What do we want to accomplish? For a lot of businesses right now, it's increase revenue, not surprisingly.
Yeah.
So once you know that, now you need to reverse engineer. So on the business side, what are those goals? Great. Well, based off of those goals, there's going to be specific KPIs that I'm going to look at now. And that's going to determine what success looks like. So if you want to increase revenue, you're going to be looking at retention, and you're going to be looking at upsells, and you're going to be looking at new customers. So we already know what those KPIs, the things that we're going to need to look at.
Yeah.
To determine like, okay, well, where do I look to determine if we've increased revenue? And then based off of that, reverse engineer again. What behaviors need to happen in order for those KPIs to look pretty, for them to look the way that we want them to look, for them to increase or decrease depending on what the KPI is. And then once we go below that, now that we know what behaviors have to happen, how do we trigger those behaviors and how do we remove the friction that's preventing those behaviors from happening as often or as quickly as we would like? Then on the community side, we're going to do the exact same thing, but we're going to do it from the member's perspective. So their goal is, I'm going to join this community for blank. It could be a support forum. I just need somewhere to go for help, and I'm sick of talking to support. Or it could be, I'm lonely and I feel alone in this and using this product, or because of my persona, and I just want to meet people like myself.
Absolutely.
Whatever that goal is. But you need to know what those goals are. And then what is the job to be done in the community? So are they there for help? Are they there to talk to people? Are they there to connect? A lot of people, especially if you have a support forum, and you'll say like, we don't get a lot of engagement. That's probably because people are only going there to get a question answered, and then they're out.
Right.
Like sometimes or they look to see if someone else has already had that question, and they're not always going to say like, hey, I was thinking the exact same question, thank you. Those people exist,
Right.
but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone that's lurking and passively in the community isn't getting value. They just are not externally communicating that they're getting value. And then those last two ones are where you form the bridge with the business.
Okay.
So this is what's been really powerful for Hub fans and our advocacy program and community champions is, how do we determine what motivates them and makes them feel appreciated? A lot of what we find is a lot of communities, especially product, like communities of product, those members want to be involved. They want to be able to share their dream list of features. They want to talk to you about what your roadmap is and help you. Like, it's mutually beneficial. You get their roadmap ideas, they get features that they need and want to be able to use it for their business, for their life, for their use case, whatever. And then what opportunities do they want to have? So there's something that I say a lot when I'm talking about like how to position advocacy, how to position community. And it's, you need to take an internal need and you need to turn it into an external opportunity.
Love that.
your customers want to be heard. Why can't they be in a webinar? Why can't they be featured? Why can't they be made to feel special? For inbound correspondence, obviously that creates a ton of word of mouth for our event, but more importantly, they feel special and they feel heard and they feel appreciated because they don't just love us, they are also deeply knowledgeable. They're subject matter experts. So now that's helping their personal brand. That's showcasing the relationship that they have with HubSpot. So that takes that internal need of, I wish we had more people to talk about inbound. That'd be great. Like we see all these tweets and stuff. That turns into, how do we create an entire program that makes our advocates feel special, that makes them feel seen, that makes them be seen as the thought leaders that they are? And so when you're trying to figure out where is that alignment, it really comes down to that internal need, external opportunity. It could be a focus group. It could be a survey like telling you what they want on your roadmap in the future. It could be beta testing. I find that where a lot of companies get community right is in the micro pieces. It's in the cabs.
Absolutely.
But they don't know how to go from that micro level of value to that macro level of value. And I find that that's where there's a disconnect. So if you already have a CAB, a customer advisory board for your community of product, if you're here and you have a community product, what does that look like to them? What are you providing a value to them? And then figure out what of those parts can you scale? That's going to help you because you have to have those communities continue to create value. And in a lot of ways, it has to continue to accelerate too.
Right.
The way that I feel when I join a community is very different than a community that I've been in for a while. My needs change. My relationships to other people in that community change. My relationship with the owners of that community or the people who manage the community, that can change. And so, like you were saying earlier, community is a daily human experiment.
Absolutely. Every day.
Every day.
And every day members are showing up differently every day, their experiences. And that actually, to the title of our webinar, especially in this impending recession, current recession, depending on how we want to talk about it, that's going to be impacting both the community team and your members. And so I think that's such a great point, Christina, with every day, that is the baseline of where you're starting from with your members.
It really is. And there's variables that you will never know about. So like you have engagement. So for everyone that said that they have low engagement, that's not surprising. And that's not an indictment of your community and of your work. A lot of people are struggling with that. There's a reason it was the biggest challenge. There's a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are going to be people who will never, ever, 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 ever engage. And that's okay.
Absolutely.
That's completely okay. That is them being a part of the community at all is how they want to engage. Maybe they're introverted, or maybe they're shy, or maybe you haven't created a safe space for them to feel like it's okay to ask a question. There's so many people who self-reject in communities. I see it all the time.
Absolutely.
One of I would say my favorite community building things is I've done a lot with marketing Twitter, and I created a community, and I like my pinned tweet went like completely crazy a couple years ago. And I continue to see people who are absolutely brilliant in the marketing field, but because they don't have a high follower count, they have this innate imposter syndrome.
Right.
And so I wanted to create a space where I'm like, you know what? I don't care how many followers you have. If you have fewer than 1,000 followers, come and say hi. Just come and say hi, connect with others. Here's the thing. I created a safe space for people to self-identify and say, like, I don't have a lot of followers. Yes, I work in marketing. Okay, cool. I get invited to the conversation. I still had replies saying, well, I do this and I don't know if that counts, but hi. So even when I created a safe space for people to talk to each other, they still self-rejected. There's a lot of people in your community that would love to be a bigger part, but they don't feel safe. And so think about like, is there a place for them to introduce themselves where it's really easy? Are there smaller groups? The other thing too is think about what that community would look like if it was in a physical space.
Absolutely. That's such a great way to contextualize it. What does it look like in that
Yeah.
physical space? I think that's one of the things with Community Canvas too. I think they
Mhm.
really establish that very well of
Mhm.
what is the space that
Yeah.
these humans are entering. And I think as community managers and professionals, we often between product, for example, and community, we're put between product, which is very confined and contained, and then community, which is this abstract, beautiful thing that doesn't necessarily operate in those bounds. So Christina, how do you measure that for success? And what ways do you see it being successful for, making sure your members feel that autonomy in your space, that safety, and how you, again, on the business side, still have to measure that and report it. It's constantly, again, that puzzle solving, that problem solving every day of
Mhm.
bringing these two worlds together that don't always necessarily coincide.
Yeah, I think there's layers of kind of the KPIs that you're going to be looking at. And just like with marketing and just like social media, vanity metrics exist.
Yeah,
So the thing that I think is the biggest push pull is you want to create impact. But a lot of the KPIs that communities actually report on, you're not reporting on the community, you're reporting on the extroverted members of your community.
facts.
And
Absolutely.
so you have incredibly valuable members, but they're introverted, or that's not how they want to be a part of the membership. So what I would do is find opportunities to have more micro moments, because introverts, like, I could have a lot to say, but if I'm nervous and I'm coming into a room of 1,000 people,
Right.
I'm gonna second guess whether I should say anything. And
Yeah.
so I find that one of the first experiments I would do is do have micro moments where people can connect with each other to see if that eases some of your passive and lurkers and honestly more introverted members
Yeah.
into engaging. If that's what they need, is just a smaller space to engage, and that's what's going to make them feel comfortable, great. That's awesome. That's going to help you learn. But also determining what the business wants to see. If you're just starting to build out a community, that vanity metric of how many members are in there is going to be like your North Star for quite a while. And
Absolutely.
there's going to be a magic number that you have to sweat until you get there. And then it's like, okay, cool. Now we can focus on other things. Um, and then it's usually engagement. So now it's like you have all these people, how many are actually talking to each other?
Right. You have the room full, but now how are they breaking out into their small groups if they are? And that
Exactly.
has that leads me to a question, Christina. What's your
Yeah.
favorite micro moment? So when you think about all of your experience in community, what do you have a favorite micro moment that stands out to you?
I think my favorite micro moment is the correspondence program. So something that I think is just really near and dear to my heart is we had the correspondence last year. And this is a micro moment that turned into a macro moment. So a core
Incredible.
memory.
Core
um,
memory unlocked.
we have our correspondence program last year, and we had 30 correspondents, absolutely amazing, brilliant, all the things. One of our correspondents named Troy Sandage, absolutely amazing, heart of gold. He was incredible. Like, he typed on Twitter to the point where I was like, I can't tweet that fast. I don't know what you're doing. Like, do you have bots? Like, what's happening? We came back this year, and Inbound really considered, like, how do we make this more special? How can we get our customers and partners and advocates involved? And so Troy was asked to be the main stage host at Inbound.
Shut up. I love that. Oh my goodness.
And so talk about making someone the hero and literally putting them on stage. We literally did that. And so this comes from him having like a micro moment where he's able to, he loves sharing his knowledge. He's a part of the podcast network. He's able to share his knowledge one year, and we just were able to see him shine. And we're just like, oh, we got to do this again. How do we make this bigger, better? And so that's something that, like, who else could give somebody that but HubSpot? Like,
Right.
and so he shared with me yesterday, his alma mater wrote a piece about him and like him being the host of Inbound. And so it's lovely. Like, I love watching good people win, And I find that like that's how all community managers are. Like
Yeah,
we thrive in other people's successes because
absolutely.
we get to be a part of that. Like I didn't make you successful, but I helped be a part of that infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And so things like that, like finding out how people want to celebrate you and how people want to engage, I think that that's something to think about. Community is very much a marriage between quantitative and qualitative data. So if you're separating people into these small groups, which small groups are the most important? And
Yeah.
by important, I mean, which ones are the most active? Which ones are
Yeah.
the people the most passionate about, or they want to do more with you? I find that if you give only, or if you don't give any kind of credence to how they can be working with you and how they can engage, they'll choose what they see other people doing.
Yeah.
I would much rather give someone the opportunity to choose their own adventure.
Yes, absolutely.
They will engage naturally the way they want to engage.
Yeah.
If you put them in a box, they're going to assume, whether you say it or not, this is how they want me to behave. So it's a yes or no kind of situation. There are advocates and community members who would love to create a YouTube video for us. There are others who would rather walk in traffic. Like, please give me something else to do for you. That's not it. Like, that's not how I want to do this. So
Absolutely.
find other ways. It could be like there could be people in your community that would hate to ask questions, but would love to be a moderator.
Yes, absolutely. I love the way that you put it into choose your own adventure, because I think that's what makes community exciting, is that
Yes.
every member is bringing their own experience and it's creating that
Mm-hmm.
canvas, that fabric for your
Yep.
community to thrive. And so you're able to, you're like with your program,
Mm-hmm.
if those members didn't engage in that way, you might have
Mm-hmm.
never had that on stage moment,
Yep.
because why would your whole organization want that without you demonstrating that and uplifting your members? It's
Yep.
brilliant. I absolutely love it.
Yep.
So transitioning perfectly again over to, and I think we've already answered it, so we can always riff on it a little more, but how can community teams demonstrate their value with their wider organization, and how can you integrate community into the organization's DNA? So you've already touched on this a little bit with your programs that you're building, but if you're new to community, how would you tackle that? How would you help, or what would your advice be to a community professional who's trying to do that hard work of getting it really into the DNA of their organization?
The thing is that there's a lot of people saying that community should have a seat at the table.
Absolutely.
Community's the table.
I love that.
Everyone touches, especially if it's a community of product and your focal point is customers. I know that that's how a lot of business cases right now, we're trying to see community is how do we do something with our customers and prospective customers. So I'll lead from that direction.
Yeah.
The thing is that we all touch our customers in varying degrees of Kevin Bacon. Like it's either the CSM or the customer owner or whatever that looks like, that customer relationship manager. You have that, which is more direct. Then you have the product team that is hopefully listening to market research and listening to surveys and looking over and seeing what people want. And so they're calibrating and making changes and creating a roadmap based off of what people have specifically asked for. You have leadership who is not only trying to make sure the customers are happy, but also their board. And so you essentially have two different communities you have to make sure are happy. You have your shareholders and you have your community of product. And then you have marketers who are intrinsically, hopefully, continuing to focus on here are the people that we service, here are the people that we want to service, how do we talk to them, how do we make something compelling and showcase our value. Then you have sales who is talking to those customers before they become customers and trying to make sure that so everyone is touching community.
Mm-hmm.
Either your future community members, your current community members, but they're touching them in some way. So community needs to be at the core of what you're doing, because that's how you make sure that your customers are at the core of what you're doing. It's customer centric. And so when you're thinking about how to do that, that's the messaging. It's we all touch this community in one shape or form. Therefore, we should be collaborating to make sure that we are all doing our part to serve this community. The thing is that especially in this economy, there's so many variables that you cannot control. So many variables you cannot control. but you can control how your team is handling the process to make sure that it's customer centric as possible, so that we go from this funnel to flywheel model, so that people are taken care of, that people feel listened to, that they feel heard, because it only takes one person to not have that community vision and not have that customer centric approach to spoil that entire experience and undoes all the good that everyone else who touched them in the process did.
Yeah.
So it has to be intrinsic. It has to be in the fabric of what you're doing. And so I think that that's how you really need to have that message of, if we're going to do a community of product and we're really creating this something special for our customers, then every single department in the company needs to be a part of that collaborative effort of, how are we serving this community? How are we adding value? How are we showcasing that we're listening? How can we showcase that their involvement in the community is actually creating impact for the business? And I think that that's what a lot of people miss too.
Yeah.
The business will talk about how well things are going, but they sometimes forget to acknowledge the people who made that change.
Yes.
If you added a product feature that was specifically demanded and requested from your customer base, and you just announce it, but you don't give them any love for that, like, imagine giving you what you've always wanted, and then imagine them giving you something that you always wanted, and they specifically say, we made this because you asked for it. This literally is alive. This exists because of you. How much different is their promotional? Like, now you've given them a sense of ownership.
Yeah.
They're going to tell,
You're building and cementing that bond. Like,
they're
I
going they're
had
going
a
to
piece of
tell,
this.
yeah, they're going to tell everybody they've ever met, this exists because
Yeah.
of me. They're going to act like they coded it. Like,
Yeah.
they're going to, and that's a good thing. That gives them
Yeah.
that sense of ownership. That sense of ownership is going to make them want to do more. It's going to want to make them raise their hand whenever there's an opportunity or whenever there's a question. There's so many customers who would love to tell you every single thing that they want to tell you about the product, the service, what they love, what they hate. And what's weird is we all have this survivor bias. We only look at the complaints.
Yeah.
And we ignore the people who are happy. They're like, they don't have any problems. They don't have any complaints. They're fine. They love us. Like, they write me Slack messages. They write me emails. Ask for the negative stuff from the people who love you.
Absolutely. Because it's always going to be that feedback that you need to hear the most, because they are most involved with your product, most involved with your community. And those are the lessons that you really need to lean into, even if it's really hard. And I think as community professionals, when we're balancing this, what can sometimes feel like a huge schism between our roles, it can feel, like you said, that survivor bias, where you're saying, okay, I have to take this information, distill it to my team, and that can be a really hard part of the role.
Yeah. And the thing is that it's so easy to say, well, these people aren't happy because they're just miserable, or they like to complain.
Yeah.
But when your diehards are, and they'll always preface it, they're lovely. Like, they'll always preface it, be like, oh, I love you guys. Like, I'm not mad. Like, everything's okay. But everything after the but, write it down.
Yep.
It's priceless, because you've picked people who, they aren't trying to mess up your day. They're not mad. They will give you the most genuine feedback that you can action on, because these are people who know your product better than anybody else. They love you. So they're not coming from a place of malice or anything like that. They genuinely are telling you from a place of, I'm fine, I'm happy, I'm good. Like, I'm not, like, I don't need anything, but this would help. Or I don't like that this doesn't happen. There's so much gold there, and you don't have to worry about, is this somebody who really loves a competitor and wants us to look bad? It's just someone who is just having a really bad day. Is this someone who just loves to be on the internet to make people have a bad day? Like, and those people exist. But if you ever wanted to know, like, what is the most pure information, and once again, you have to create a safe space for that. When I joined HubSpot, I had been a fan for years, so I knew a lot of the major, like, the people who I would immediately be like, I'm going to work with you. We're going to build this together. Like, I need your foresight on this. I immediately interviewed them, and I said, like, I want to hear the bad too. I want to hear the negative.
Mhm.
Please don't just sugarcoat it and be like, I love everything. I can't do
It is
anything with
perfect.
that. It's perfect. Nothing's perfect.
No.
Um, and so interview your community members, especially if they're introverted and they get like a one-on-one. They won't
Yeah.
do a coffee chat if you set it up. They hate having meetings. But if you're like, I'd love to hear about your experience and how we can make it better for you. I would love to learn the good, the bad, and the ugly, and
Yeah.
create a safe space for them to know that it's okay and that they're not complaining. They're giving
Absolutely.
insight. There's a very big difference. I find that like I find the use of the word complaint is too harsh a lot of
Yeah.
times. If
It's
it's genuine
very
feedback, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very charged. And like you said, if they're coming to you, it's coming from that place of genuine care and concern, and they want you to be successful and they want the product or whatever
Mhm.
your community is based around to be successful. And
Yeah.
so being able to really tap into that is basically a community superpower in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
it is. It really is. And that's what fuels. Then you're talking about like how can you drive impact? Well, now you have product roadmap because of it. A lot of times they'll actually work through and help you beta test.
Yeah.
They'll like there's so much of impact there that you can create so that like how did it help the business? It literally set up the roadmap.
Yeah.
A lot of times, especially your power users, they won't just give you an idea, they'll tell you how they would do it.
Yeah, they'll give you the whole formula. They'll tell
They'll
you,
give
I've
you,
been thinking about this, and then you
yeah,
read it, and it's like, wow, thank you. We've been trying to solve this problem, whatever it may be. And they've already gone through and perfectly edited it, and they're giving you this gift. And so,
yeah.
how, in your mind, Christina, do you help translate that to your team? So you're getting all of this insight, and
Mhm,
how do you collaborate with your team to make
mhm,
sure that this is being heard at every level, right? So
yeah,
fantastic gold nuggets. How do
yeah.
you distill that into company gold, if you will?
Yeah. I find that, and it's kind of come back to complaint. A lot of companies have a process in place for escalations, like this person's on Twitter who's hyper mad at us, this person's on Instagram, this person left a review. We don't do that for the good though.
That's so
Like,
true.
what if you had an escalation process for the love, for the suggestions? And
Yeah.
so HubSpot has the ideas forum. It's an amazing place where you're able to go in there and you're able to share like, hey, I can't do this. This is how I think we should be able to do this. And then what you do is you have the power of the community to upvote it so
Mm,
that that's a way to show like as a mass group, this is something that we actively want. And then I do a lot of social listening. So when I see something that might be negative, that might be positive. I saw something yesterday that was talking about how great the YouTube channel is and marketing. Immediately sent it to the YouTube team and was like, here's some love.
oh, perfect.
People need those things. People, we all see the negative. We all see the complaints. We all see like the rants on social. There's so much cool stuff that's not being shared too. So if you have an escalation process for those negative things that people need to see, do you have an escalation process for ideas? Do you have an escalation process for, hey, I just wanted to let you know that the team internally loves you, but like here's a customer that's saying how great you are. Because a lot of people are head down. They're not going to be on Twitter, living on Twitter, doing social listening like I do.
Right.
They deserve to see that love too. So check and see like how you're communicating that good stuff, especially if someone's on your team who's doing social listening and or in the community and is seeing how people talk to others, and create those micro moments to be able to tell the product team like, hey, this is something that they were continuing to see in the community. Is this something, maybe that is an event we can set up where we can have a private invitation, couple members of our product team, a couple people from the community that mentioned this. They're going to feel special. They're going to walk through their needs. They're going to help ideate with the product team. It's always shocking to me how little the lift is to make people feel special.
Yeah,
If just make them feel included, make them feel like they have VIP behind the scenes access.
absolutely.
It doesn't take a lot. Sometimes it's liking someone's tweet. Sometimes it's saying like, hey, we'd love to have you in this focus group or have you included in this webinar. Or do you want to talk to the product team? I keep seeing you mention this idea. Can we schedule something? That
Yeah.
person's going to feel so happy that you not only listened, but then you actioned on it. So
Yeah.
think about those ways, and then that's going to help business. those community members, especially if you have a community of product, if they feel like they belong and they feel like they engage, when they have someone at work consider a competitor, it's not price to price. It's not feature to feature.
Yeah.
It's price, feature, and community versus that community is now a strategic advantage, because someone could beat you on price and someone could beat you on features, but can they beat you on the people who are there to support you in the community if you have a bad day or if you have a question? Probably not. So
Right.
it really is that unlock that I think, and it takes time, which is obviously hard because we all kind of like want to run into things and just ship
Yeah.
everything. But community is the ultimate strategic advantage. It's the moat. When they talk about like having a business moat, imagine having an army of people who love you and protect each other and answer each other's questions and are there if someone has a bad day and are there to share like moments with people. That's literally what a community can do for a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the, in our discussion, we've been touching on the recession. So with that in mind, and I think this is always the age-old question in community is how do we show that to teams when maybe you're just starting out and you see that vision at what you're starting to build? So how do you, in your experience, Christina, communicate with your teams, or in the past have you communicated this is the end vision, here's how we're going to get this moat outside of strategy? So we've touched on so many of these elements, but is there anything specific that you found when working with teams really helps to actualize that for them?
You need to do it just like product. You're going to have a V1, a V2, a V3, a V4. You really need to showcase what that's going to look like. You can't just say, here's end game, and it's going to be perfect. We're going to have 100,000 people. They're engaged all the time. It's lovely. What you need to do is you need to make sure that it's aligned to those business goals. You need to make sure you need to do that two by column first, building them in parallel. Where is that alignment? Then do the community canvas. I would honestly make sure that you not only as a community builder do that community canvas, but you have your leadership team fill out that community canvas.
Absolutely.
To make sure there is alignment, because otherwise you can assume, especially if you've done community before, well, this is how we did it here, and this is what success looked like here. So I'm just going to basically copy and paste it over here, and then leadership's mad. And it's because the two of y'all didn't talk about like, what does success look like? That's the most powerful question, is what does success look like in 6 months? What does it look like in a year? What does it look like in 2 years? What does it look like in 5 years? What does it look like in 10 years? And what does it look like in a matter of success? What does it look like from a business perspective? And what does it look like from a community member perspective? Because you can have tons of people in there and them not be happy.
Right. And
tons of people, but no one engages, like things like that.
Absolutely. And with that success in mind, I think when you're having that conversation with leadership, being able to distinguish to them that there's two pipelines of success that you're balancing. And I think that's something that community professionals sometimes we struggle with, where you have your member perspective, you're thinking about all the wonderful ways you can delight them, surprise them, uplift them. And then on the business side, you have these really big initiatives that you're trying to push across the line. And so it's that balance of being able to communicate to leadership, here's our success in the full picture. That way you're talking about your strategy, you're contextualizing it. And I love the way that you said they should be filling out the canvas too, because I think often that's not necessarily an exercise that maybe leadership would be doing, because from the work that I've been doing with a lot of our clients here at Hivebrite is typically it's a one-person show in community, and that's still industry standard in a lot of ways. So for folks who don't necessarily have a larger team, I think that's a really brilliant strategy, and ensuring that there is accountability with management as well to show them this is what success is going to take and here's how we're going to do it.
I think it's also going to show your red flags very early.
Very quickly.
Very early, because if leadership has a very different canvas than the community builder, no. Schedule a meeting. You need to have a meeting. You need to have a sit down
immediately.
Immediately. Because that's going to tell you that there's going to be friction and there's going to be a disconnect between, like, I can already tell you that that community will never be successful based on leadership if the community builder builds it the way they do. So you need to figure out like, which hills do you die on? Like, if they're saying like, we have this community because of revenue, and the community builder's like, well, we have this community because we want to create a safe space for these people. Like, that's a massive disconnect.
Yeah.
And they're going to immediately that's going to also tell you they want levers. They want to see every single lever that's going to drive revenue. And like, how are you going to do that? So I feel like the community canvas is like that core piece to drive alignment, as well as the 2-column is crucial, because it's really going to make sure that leadership understands your point of view and how you're building this and what your expectations are, and kind of what you're trying to build. But they're also going to come from a business acumen perspective. They're going to look from a business case and say like, well, this is why we're doing this. This is how we would do it. This is who it's for. And you're going to have to make sure that there is, by the time, before you start actually building and creating that strategy, you need to figure out how to make your community canvases be one singular document.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think
sometimes,
sometimes we get caught in between both of them, right? So as community professionals, you have this difference that you're trying to close. And I think that's such an important point of, are we on the same canvas or the same page, to make sure that you are actually able to create your programming in a way that is member centric? Because I think that's where we struggle the most as professionals, is bridging that gap.
I completely agree. I think having that foundation needs to be as solid as humanly possible.
Absolutely.
Then you can start building. And I think the bigger situation too is, in the past, a lot of people, I don't think this is surprising, when there was ever a recession, marketing was usually one of the first things cut. And I think because community has been a big buzzword, that's this extra layer now. So I've seen a lot of community managers, directors of community get laid off. So I feel like community, because it's just been attached on so recently, because it hasn't really been able to be out long enough to really drive the long-term value that it can, it's the first thing on the chopping block. And I think that stems from that lack of a strong foundation. There was never an understanding of what this is supposed to be. And I think that that's where you get that disconnect between what community is. That's where they're like, well, we created a Discord channel, or I started a newsletter. Like, newsletter as a community is something that I think all community managers are going to just like have a moment about.
It's a whole moment.
It's a whole moment. But that's the thing. It's knowing like what actually, it's going to the very early stages of what even is a community, and does your definition as a business or community what mine is? Because sometimes it's a social media manager and they're like, you have to take care of the community. I'm like, okay, cool. What am I doing? You're responding to tweets.
Not quite.
Okay. I don't know. Okay. Things like that. Or it could be like, you're going to start a newsletter and it goes, I was like, no, it's one directional.
Controversial if true.
So things like that. So I think that you have to have that strong foundation. I think that's why we're seeing a lot of that, is because community never had the foundation to really be launched and built the way that it needed to. And because of that, of course, it didn't meet the goals. There was no alignment. It was never going to be successful anyway. But now that you have the extra pressures of the economy being in this slump, it feels super easy to cut. And it's because the impact and the value was never finally realized, because it was never really determined. And so it's very much this domino effect. It was always going to fall off if that foundation wasn't strong enough and there wasn't alignment. So do you get anything from this? Determine the alignment, please.
Yes, that is the first step when you're thinking about strategy. How are you aligning so that you're not on that chopping block, right? But again, it's not something that you can control if it's leadership. I think that's something as professionals that is a really hard pill to swallow, especially community builders. We're trying to bring everyone in. And so being able to see that for what it is, I think is really important. And Christina, I guess, round out our conversation, how do you see community evolving in organizations in the future? So I know you touched lightly on, since 2020 with the pandemic, we've seen this community space grow exponentially. How do you see it growing in the future?
I see there being more community led, where it's you've built this community, you've built all the micro groups and all those things where people can do things. Where do you start offering opportunities for them to do their own thing within the community? Maybe they get to build their own events, or they get to create their own micro groups. How do you essentially, probably the best way to describe it is, if community right now is building a house on this piece of land, when do you get to the point where you let your kids build their own house on that land?
Ooh, I love that.
Where do you get to that place where it's still your land? You
Mhm.
still are fostering this relationship and connection, but I find that that's where Web3 wants to go, but they think it's just a Discord. It's how do you give them autonomy
Yeah,
within the community space itself so they can build within that space? I think that's the true next gen of communities. We've built all this for you.
yeah,
Now here's opportunities within the community for you to build things yourself. We already see this on like a tiny baby level with like UGC within the community,
yeah,
or like them being able to write their own blogs within the community. That's very much like stage one of that. But
right.
I think, what does autonomy and building within that already pre-built space, what does that look like? Because now you're empowering creators to build their own communities within.
Yeah,
I think that's the next phase. I think that's the future community, is now it's community led. Now they're not just starting conversations without you poking them and prodding them and asking questions. Now they're doing deeper behaviors within the community without you asking, because you've given them that freedom.
absolutely. And I think that we'll definitely see that in the next handful of years really take off, especially considering the way that Gen Z has grown up using technology as well, and that autonomy that they've experienced their whole life with technology being tech first. And
Yeah.
so that's going to really shift the way that we are engaging with members as well. And it's such an exciting future for community led. I
Yeah.
love that. Such a high note. Okay, friends. So Christina, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
I think we can hop over to Q&A. So let me open this up. We got a few questions. So we have a few. So we'll go ahead and we'll kick off these questions, Christina. I'll read through them. All right. So our first one is, as far as relationship building is concerned, how can you meaningfully connect with your members?
Probably the best way to do it is figure out how you can do it in a one-to-one and a one-to-many way, making it an opportunity for them to help self-identify. If you can find something that they're really passionate about, that's a really easy way to connect. I always speak in metaphors. So I like to think, if you come into a community, think of a community like your high school lunchroom.
Yeah.
If you don't know anybody by sight, you're going to look for your people. These people dress like me. I saw that person in my class. Like, who are your people? Your brain's going to immediately try to figure out who's most likely to be my people, so I have somewhere to sit. The same thing with building relationships, is finding out where are those like deeper common grounds, and then making them feel special by listening to them.
Yeah.
The best thing about, especially as your community is building and growing and scaling, being able to talk one-to-one to a human is going to feel more and more special, because the more people are in that community, the more it feels difficult for a singular human to be able to reach out to you. So knowing, like, having someone, especially if they're like the face of the community, to say, like, if you have any questions, you can just reach out to me. If you need anything, like, go ahead. That builds those relationships, because what you're doing is you're setting up a standard of trust. If you need anything, I'm here. And then when you actually do what you say you're going to do, and you're actually there for them when they ping you, now you have these trust bonds, and now you can continue to get deeper and deeper in that relationship. But I find that, especially when you're dealing with strangers, you have to set up a standard of trust first. So building this relationship, I'm Annette. Here's how I'm Annette. If you have the questions, if you are struggling, if you need anything, here's how you can get in touch with me. That's a really great first step to set that standard of trust. And then you can start building and building, but also interviewing.
Yeah.
Interviewing members and being honest with them, and giving them a place where they can be hyper negative, hyper happy, like anything like that.
Just feeling their feelings, just being honest with you and authentic.
Making sure people feel heard and seen is the ultimate unlock for relationships. Everyone. That's why social media thrives. We all want to, like, make a video or tweet something into the universe and be validated and seen and heard for it. Social media is literally a symptom of people wanting to feel heard and seen. It exists because of that. And until that need is met in a physical capacity, social media will always be around, because we are always thirsting and always need that validation, that opportunity of like, I'm going to say this and hopefully someone agrees with me, or someone thinks it's so great that they should continue to see it in other places. So it's really that human, those core human needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And as an example from community work I've done, just for the audience to contextualize that too, is it can be as simple as setting up drip campaigns within your environment so that so using myself as an example, you're welcoming your members in as they're coming in, and you're telling them those calls to action that align with your business, but also it's welcoming them and saying, hey, it's so great we'll go with the lunchroom example. So great you're the new student here. Here are where all the after school activities are. Here's the clubs you should be joining. This is where you can find your locker. You're really helping them establish themselves in the community, and then checking back in with them. I think often we see that kind of fall off within communities is, okay, they've engaged, they seem happy, but do that, fold in the interviews that Christina is talking about in that check-in, so that you're saying, hey, you've been here for 6 months, how's it going? Or hopefully a little sooner than 6, but as an example, that's a really great way to establish and continue the trust too. So you want to make sure you have that great introduction, but how are you continuing to demonstrate that trust for your members? Absolutely love that point, Christina. So we have a couple other questions. We'll try to get to them all. The next one is, what is the most common mistakes organizations are making in regard to community building?
They're so excited about picking a tech product that they lose sight of their community members.
Yeah,
100%.
100%.
I get more questions about what tool should I use?
Absolutely. And
what do you want your community members to do? What environment do you want? Like, it's the wrong question to the same problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think as community professionals, we sometimes get in this rabbit hole of, what does my tech stack look like? And then because it's much more, again, it's more defined. And so I think as humans, we tend to gravitate towards things that are very defined and it's easy. And so we're like, okay, here's the tech stack. This is exactly how I'm going to build it. But like you said, then we're losing sight of members. So making sure that you have that member-centric approach is absolutely essential. Awesome. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we have a question here. How important is SEO in community building when content is concerned?
Anytime content's concerned, SEO is important. I would just be very hyper aware that as time goes on, more and more of your community members know what that looks like. Great example of this is the current struggle between Google and TikTok.
Yes.
People, especially like Gen Z, and I hate to pick on Gen Z, but they're just the perfect example of it.
Absolutely.
They've grown up around tech their entire life. So they know what a Google search experience is, and they still choose to not use it. They completely rebuke it and move on to TikTok, and then they search in a completely different way. The way that you would search on Google and the way that you would search on TikTok is hyper different.
Yep.
So SEO is important, but just like with any good SEO, it's more about facilitating it for the person you want to see it versus the algorithm or the platform that you're wanting to do it. So it's no longer like Google's not the end all be all for SEO now, and then search, because you have TikTok and other tools. So SEO is important, but I would just be hyper aware that people don't necessarily all search the same way. So depending on who you want to see that content, the way that you're using search, the meta tags you're using, the keywords you're using are going to be different. And that's not a bad thing. Just be aware that behaviors for search are definitely changing, especially if you're looking at younger audiences that are specifically rebuking the traditional search methods of Google and how SEO works like on that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really important point to be thinking about who is your audience, how are they finding you, and being able to tap into that more than the broad approach to casting that wide net with SEO. So if you're looking to have Gen Z more engaged, how are you making sure that's facilitated? And then making sure you're covering that for all your demographics. Okay, next question, Christina, and we'll close out with this one, is how do you increase the longevity of engagement, especially when they are volunteers?
You need to know why they're actually engaging and
Yeah.
know what triggers them. So there's a thing called habit loops that I'm absolutely obsessed with. And it's what you're doing, especially in good community, is you're doing constant conditioning. If you engage in this kind of chat, this is what's going to happen. So if I engage and I get loved on and validated, and they're like, oh, you're so brilliant, then like I'm probably more likely to answer more questions, because anytime I want a dopamine hit and feel special, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do that. That's not the same for everybody. So determining what your triggers are in your habit loops and how and what's going to motivate them and be a good trigger for them. That's what I find too, is a lot of communities, they use one specific type of carrot.
Yeah.
But not everyone likes carrots.
Yeah.
So you're only going to get, yeah, there's going to be people who are, that doesn't work for me. I'm good. Like, I don't need to do that. And you'll think it as she just doesn't want to engage. Whereas, no, you just haven't given me enough reason to. So I think it comes down to doing a lot of community psychology. I think that there needs to be, depending on the size of your team, and even if it's a one-person team, they tend to know that community like the back of their hand. So they're going to know, well, this person usually only responds on Thursdays. This person's usually mean. This person's usually never comments. I'll be shocked if they comment. They just intrinsically know because they've been in that space. This is where the problem is with engagement, is that is where qualitative data is your best friend. You need to know these people on an individual level. This group of people, they love these kind of asks. But if you ask them this kind of question, or you gave them and that's the thing too, there's so many people who would rather sit in your community and type, but they never want to be in an event.
Right.
They'll never RSVP.
Yeah.
Does it mean that they hate you? No.
No.
Just, you gotta really, if you have the opportunity, do some community psychology and figure out what motivates them. And then once you know what motivates them, how can you trigger their behavior to do engagement based off of what motivates them? And then how do you repeat that process so that they'll continue over and over and over again to come back and engage, because you found what motivates them and how to make them do that.
Absolutely. Christina, I could talk to you all day about
we should do that.
So wonderful. But looking at time, unfortunately, we're running out. So thank you so much for all of the questions that you've been answering today and just being here with us. I really, really appreciate it. And just thank you for sharing your insights and expertise with us. So friends, thank you so much for tuning in. A survey link has been dropped in the chat. We would really appreciate it if you could take the survey and share your feedback with us for today's webinar. If you have any other questions, Christina, where can folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter at @ChristinaG. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to chat. But thank you so much for your time today. It was an honor speaking with you.
Thank you so much, friends. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.